fellow mech warriors, Mage Leader here, and Jesus Christ. Do I really have to talk about this? Alright, well, I guess I'll provide a little bit of background on this whole situation. I was browsing around online, as you do, when I stumbled upon a post on the various Facebook groups that I am a part of that are Battletech related, and, well, it kind of just speaks for itself. Now, ordinarily, I just write this type of thing off as a very clear troll. I mean, there's no possible way this person could be earnest, right? Look at it. In my experience, this meme format is typically used when you're only semi-seriously suggesting something, and it's more just a case of laughing at other people. Just because you say something in one of these memes doesn't mean necessarily that you actually hold this belief or that you agree with it. So ordinarily I'd look at something like this and just kind of roll my eyes, go, ha, guy thinks he's funny, but whatever, and then just move on with my day. But then I had a little gander down at the comments section, and I noticed a few things that were kind of concerning. There was a surprising amount of support for this idea of having aliens in Battletech. And I think that's a little bit of an issue. Now, I don't mean that to say, if you want aliens in Battletech, you're dumb, or you aren't valid in some way. More, I think it's a case of maybe you don't quite understand what it is that this setting's all about, and what it is that makes this such an interesting universe in the first place. I'm going to start by kind of addressing the meme itself, simply because after all the exchanges I saw in the comments section, I'm starting to think that the person who posted it actually does hold this belief. And I just kind of want to explain to everybody else why it is that there aren't aliens in Battletech, and why that's actually a good thing, and why that should not change. So, starting off with the meme itself. So, as you can see, it's the classic Scroll of Truth meme. This is a format that I've used extensively myself. It's a good time, it's fun, but like with any joke, there needs to be well, I guess needs to be isn't quite the right word, but the best jokes have a kernel of truth to them, and that's what provides you with the humor. This one, on the other hand, I think it's designed to elicit a certain response from the audience, which is, again, something I've used this meme format for plenty of times, just to do a little bit of trolling. But I also can't shake this idea that maybe, just maybe, this is made in earnest, so I'm just going to address it the way that it is. And, even if it wasn't meant in earnest, there were a lot of people who unironically agreed with it. Okay, so first of all, the statement is that aliens would actually freshen up the Battletech setting. And to that I say, what do you mean by that? Freshen up the Battletech setting? Is it stale? Is it stagnant? Is it somehow not good enough as it is? I don't really understand what the point there is. The Battletech setting doesn't need to be freshened up. It's been freshened up enough. God knows it's been freshened up too goddamn much between the Dark Age and Ill Clan. It's been shaken up too much. We're trying to get it back to a sort of status quo where it's actually somewhat sensible. It's been pushed around and taken to the absolute extremes of logic, to the point where it's almost impossible to follow nowadays. So this idea that we need to freshen it up more kind of makes me cringe a little bit. I know that word's kind of overused, but it legitimately does. I scratch my head and wonder, what makes you think that shaking things up even further than they already have, Comstar is gone, the HPG network is still kaput, the clans have overrun Terra, and the entire basis of everything that the Inner Sphere has ever been has been thrown into the trash can. What makes you think that freshening up the setting more by having aliens come in would make it better? I, honest to God, cannot follow that line of reasoning whatsoever. So we've already jumped the shark 5 or 6 times, and you want to just suddenly bring in more stuff that makes no sense. After we had the god-awful invasion of Terra by Clan Wolf, I just can't see anything like that even beginning to work. So that's the first part. It doesn't need any more freshening up. What it needs is to take a few steps back and tone things down significantly so that it actually starts to make sense again. You know, WizKids really tore the franchise a new asshole, and I think that they're trying to pick up the pieces and put it back together again. And so far, it's not been going super well, but, I mean, I didn't really expect it to be going well until they are able to clean up a bunch of the messes. You know, you gotta take it one step at a time. But what certainly would not help the mess that Battletech is already in is to bring in aliens. That's going to make things even worse, and I think that would be like the final death knell for this franchise. So then we can address the second part of the statement here. Improve the boring human versus human storyline. Alright. This is the part that actually pisses me off. This is the reason I'm making this video. Is because I feel like this is the part where most people are agreeing with this meme. Most people kind of ignore that first part of the statement because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense on its own. The second part, this is the part that concerns me. People who seem to think that human versus human is boring, or that the way Battletech has been doing it is boring, and that it would be much better if we had some aliens for them to fight because human versus human isn't as interesting. I struggle to see exactly what the position is, but I'm going to try and do my best. I think this kind of stems from a place of enjoying other sci-fi universes. You know, you've got things like I'll say the dreaded term Warhammer 40k. Warhammer 40k is filled with alien races, and some of them have different ideologies and different cultures and ways of doing things, and that is part of what creates the conflict with humanity. Then there's universes like Star Trek and Star Wars. And the thing is, especially with something like 40k or Star Trek, that really grinds my gears, it's always been this idea of a united humanity. It's present through a lot of science fiction. You know, a lot of those universes have a unification conflict where all the cultures and all the beliefs that humans have held for millennia at this point are all just kind of swept under the rug, and now humanity is considered one single entity, and they all speak the same language, and they all have the same core values and culture, and it's one of the most unrealistic things about many of these sci-fi settings is that humanity one day just decides, we'll all just kind of get along, and we'll just abandon everything that has caused conflict with us for the past 2,000 years or more. It's kind of silly, and honestly, it can come across as a little insulting, you know, because if you hold any super important beliefs to yourself, it's basically the writer saying, well, those beliefs don't really matter because in the future humanity will reject it and we'll all just come together like the fucking Beatles song, and we'll all sing Kumbaya and everything will be hunky-dory, and our real threat will be aliens from outer space, and the existence of them will cause humanity to band together. No, there are human cultures that just do not mix well with each other. They are diametrically opposed to each other. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't make, one better than the other per se, but it does mean that people are going to have a hard time getting along, and you're not just going to delete that sort of thing overnight. It's deeply rooted in who we are as human beings. And one of the things that Battletech does that I've always appreciated is, as humanity is spreading out and exploring the stars, they're forming up along those same cultural lines as before. They You have the Lyran Commonwealth, which is filled with a bunch of Germanic and Scandinavian people. You've got the Draconis Combine, which is full of the sort of Japanese influence. You've got the communist bloc going for the Capellan Confederation, and you've got like all the smaller nations that just kind of don't want to be part of the big boys club, kind of go to the Free Worlds League, and then you've got the mainland Europe kind of going into House Davian. Humanity is still very fractured along those same lines as before, and those cultural differences are still what drive a lot of the conflict. That's part of what makes the conflict of the setting feel kind of grounded and real, because the people are fighting for the same things that we've historically fought for thousands of years. The more things change, the more they stay the same. So the idea that everybody would have to band together to defeat an outside threat, they did that already with the clan invasion, and I think it was handled fairly well there, where yes, everybody needs to fight the clans, but also they're busy fighting each other because nobody trusts each other. They've been fighting each other for way too long to just kind of overnight snap their fingers and say, well, that doesn't matter as much as it used to. So, long story short, humanity isn't unified in Battletech because it would be unrealistic for them to be. The conflicts that happen in this setting are human versus human for that reason. That is what conflict has been for us historically. We don't band together. We don't overcome our differences. We don't work well with each other because we can't. There's just certain things that do not mix with each other. And that's fine. That's how we are as a species. So when you bring in aliens, something with its own outside culture, something that is evolved completely on another planet from the dawn of time itself, and you bring that in, you're already kind of forcing all of humanity into one little box. This is where it's a convenient writing trope that other sci-fi universes use, and sometimes it works, but it's typically one of those suspend your disbelief and shrug your shoulders type of thing. Like, yeah, humanity is all together now, humanity is one species, because this other species is also unified, and because it's too much work to keep track of like hundreds of different factions with each individual species and have them have infighting and jockeying for power and positioning, all that other kind of thing. It's too much to keep track of even for some of the most talented writers out there, and even if they did, it wouldn't be particularly interesting to read because you would be stuck with smaller scale conflicts all the time, and you couldn't get to the big scale stuff that everybody wants to see. But really, what's bothering me about this is boring human versus human. If you think that a human versus human storyline is boring or uninteresting, then at the risk of sounding like a gatekeeper, I'm going to say probably 40K is the setting for you, because that's not what we're about here. Battletech is a universe that is built around a simulator game. It's based around, the whole idea of the game is trying to have a grounded depiction of mech and combined arms combat that feels grounded and real. It's harder to do that when you bring in aliens and alien technology from beyond the veil. You start bringing in things that aren't manufactured by people, things that run off of essentially space magic or just whatever these aliens happen to be using. You take away a lot of that grounded aspect of the setting, because now all bets are off. You no longer have to justify why your giant robot has a cannon that shoots a beam of supercharged particles. You don't have to think about the logistics of how that sort of thing works anymore. You can just say, well, it's an alien thing, and so it just works because the aliens have impressive tech. And again, we kind of saw a little bit of this in the clan invasion, but even with the clans, there was some attempt at explanation and justification because they are still humans. They come from the same place as us. We share a history with them. So that stuff still had to be at least somewhat grounded. When you bring in aliens, that goes out the window. You don't have to justify it. I mean, they still could, but the easy way out is certainly to just take a look at it and say, well, we don't have to explain it, so why bother? It's, I don't think that they're going to take the extra time that it takes to explain every little detail of how these things work if they were already at the point where they're bringing in an entire alien civilization with advanced technology into the setting. I think part of the reason for that would be that in order to have these aliens be a legitimate threat, they would need to be technologically advanced, because humanity is technologically advanced. They need to have things that are at the very least on par, if not superior to human technology. So you're going to have things that run essentially on space magic, or things that are built out of bullshitium. It would cause a big mess. It would cause a lot of the grounded aspect of the setting to go out the window, because now people are going to want to scrounge for alien tech, try and find a way to strap it onto their battle mechs, and things like when you have a laser on your mech, you can point to what factory it was made on, what world it was made on, what company did it. For some of them, you can even go back to what year they started manufacturing it, and the circumstances that surrounded that initial push for laser development. You can go back and have that level of detail. That's the whole point of the setting. That's the draw of the setting, is that it's grounded and realistic in that way, despite dealing with things like giant robots and lasers and massive cannons that are just absolutely ridiculous in size. You can deal with that sort of thing because they've made an attempt to keep it grounded. When you bring in an alien weapon, well, that's made by these guys, and they came in from way out here at some point, and it just kind of does its thing, and that's about all the explanation that you're probably going to get. But the other thing about that is, with human versus human being boring. There is plenty of grounds for interesting storytelling and compelling conflicts in a human versus human setting. If you need aliens coming in with advanced, explosives and crazy death lasers in order to be interested in a setting, then again, I'm going to say 40K is where you need to go, because that is what that setting's all about. It's all about turning things out to be as ridiculous and over the top as humanly possible. That's where you belong. If you think that humans up against humans is boring, and that it's not as interesting as having bug-eyed monsters coming in from out of nowhere and, absolutely wrecking everyone's day, then Battletech isn't your setting. The core idea of the Battletech setting's conflicts is that you don't need those monsters out there, because there are plenty of monsters right in your own backyard. Humans are perfectly capable of being those kinds of monsters. The conflicts feel grounded, they feel real, they feel relatable, because these are the types of things that we have encountered in our history, the things that we could feasibly encounter again in our future. So when you bring in something that's from outside, you kind of dehumanize the conflict a lot. It becomes less relatable, because now you're fighting bug-eyed monsters from way out in the extremely deep periphery, or out in deep space somewhere, or they come in from another galaxy. Now it's a much more straightforward conflict. Well, humans are obviously the good guys in this situation. Like, yeah, there can be some bad guys here and there, but you want your species to survive, and so it justifies everything. Whereas with a more traditional Battletech story, the morality is a lot more gray. I mean, if you're reading one of the books that are actually written well, and not something about the Rosselhog Dominion, then yeah, the conflict is fairly gray, because people on both sides have good points. So that human aspect of these conflicts is what makes them compelling in the first place. It's not about having the big explosive action all the time. That's present here, and there are a lot of stories that kind of exist just for the fireworks show. But what sets this setting apart from so many others is that these conflicts are all human, they are all morally gray. Well, most of them are morally gray. And that it's not always easy to pick who's right and who's wrong in these situations, because it's a grounded conflict that makes more sense. It's not a fantasy setting. It's not something that's designed to just be a clear-cut good versus evil, humans versus monsters type of story. And if the primary conflict is boring to you, then I will be perfectly frank, you don't belong. Because that is what has made this franchise popular. This is why the core fans, the ones who have been here since the beginning, this is why they love this setting. So, if you come in from outside and you see this and it's boring to you, and you want it changed, this is the exact kind of thing that people were worried about with the 40k diaspora, with the setting getting changed. I spoke up in favor of 40k fans coming in, specifically because I said they wouldn't try to do this sort of thing. They wouldn't try to change what makes it good. They would understand that it's different. They would understand that it's unique, that it's not the same as 40k, and that it doesn't need those things that 40k has in order to be good and enjoyable. But if the support that I see for this post is any indication, then maybe I was slightly mistaken and a little too optimistic in that view. If this is the sort of thing that people are going to come... Now, I don't know what the opinion is or where the person who posted this comes from. It's perfectly possible that this is an old-time Battletech fan who's been around since the very beginning, and now they're pushing for this because they think it's a legitimately good idea. And, that's completely possible. I doubt it. I think that if you've been with Battletech for this long, you would know what it is that has drawn people to this franchise, and you would probably have been drawn by the same things, but it's technically possible that this is another old fan. But to me, it smacks of somebody who's come in from another setting and has said, well, this should be more like something else. This is not what Battletech is. It's not what Battletech should be. Battletech is grounded, Battletech is human, Battletech is relatable. It's what we love about this setting. We don't want it to be like anything else. You can point to other franchises, you can point to other sci-fi settings all you want. It's not what we want here at Battletech. We want our conflicts human, we want them to be the way that they've always been. Finally, I just want to address a point. I'm 22 minutes into this, so probably a little bit moot at this point. Anyone who's going down to the comments section is already gone. But just in case somebody who actually wants to watch the entire video before leaving a comment, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, the Tetati. Yes, Battletech tried to do sapient aliens before. It didn't go very well. The book was a bit of a mess. Most fans that I've talked to, a lot of them debate the canonicity of this book. The official stance is that it's technically canon, but also it was a mistake. This is an earlier Battletech book. This is kind of before they had everything nailed down. And while, yes, this alien species does exist, they're in a part of space that is incredibly difficult to get to. Only 2 jump ships have ever gotten there, and I don't think either of them were able to come back. You can't get to the inner sphere from this place, so it's completely irrelevant. And the official stance is that sapient aliens do not fit with the Battletech setting, and there are no plans whatsoever to revisit this concept. So while they're perfectly happy to sell you this book again and make some money off of it, because, of course, they're not going to delete something from canon if they can make money off of it instead, their stance is instead that it may as well not be canon because it's not something they're ever going to try again, and it's something that they've admitted that they really shouldn't have tried in the first place. So yes, the Tetati do exist, but they exist in an area that has no bearing on the inner sphere whatsoever. They couldn't come to the inner sphere even if they wanted to. They aren't technologically advanced enough for that type of thing anyway, and they were only kind of borderline sapient in the first place, so they don't count, they're irrelevant, doesn't matter. There are no aliens in Battletech. There shouldn't be any aliens in Battletech. There will not be any aliens in Battletech. Please, for the love of God, don't push this. Please. Oh my God. Battletech has already suffered enough at the hands of some piss-poor writing. It doesn't need to go the generic sci-fi route on top of everything else. If you do that, the people who have stuck with this franchise through thick and thin, who've been through the Jihad and been through the Dark Age and been through Ilklan, this would probably be the straw that breaks the camel's back, because it would just completely erase what Battletech is, what it's always been, why they loved it in the first place. This would be the moment that the setting actually dies, and the only people who would be left enjoying it would be the people who thought this was a good idea in the first place. But when you have a tabletop universe that only a few people like, good luck getting a game of it going. That's all that I have to say. I know this video was a bit more on the negative side and a bit more on the ranting side, and may have even been incoherent, but I hope that I've at least managed to get some of my points across and hopefully nip this position in the bud a little bit. I could also potentially have just been overreacting to a troll post, which is incredibly possible, in which case, congratulations. You won, you triggered me, and now I've made an embarrassing half-hour-long rant about it, so you probably had a good laugh, and somebody gets something good out of this. So, I consider that an absolute win. Let's fucking go. So, I've rambled long enough about this. For those of you that are still here after all that nonsense I just spewed, thanks for watching. This is Mage Leader, signing off.